Okay, so I'm now going to show you how to start a color. And remember, depending on what program you use, the methods may differ a little bit, but especially if you work with programs like PhotoPaint, Adobe Photoshop, or Corel Painter, they are similar in the ways that I'm going to show you. And you might find, for example, colors. You can go to this little toolbar here, and you can find it over here, and then just pick any of the colors that you find here. You can go up and down like this, and so forth. There are so many ways of how to color in these fantastic programs, and go ahead and look around, of course. But in the beginning, I would suggest that you just go with the standard brushes. In PhotoPaint, it's called a paint tool, and in Corel Paint and Photoshop, it might be called a brush tool. And there's so many brushes that you can get hold of. For example, here, if you choose the paint tool here, the brush tool, when that's selected, then you can go up here. Then this is activated as well. You can get hold of so many brushes. There's so many nibs, so-called nibs, to get various effects and so on. But before we go into that, because that's another course almost, if we would now see this as a course, which it's not. There's so many things we can do. But I want to show you that traditionally what we do, if we zoom in here, for example, you can use. I'm using the scroll wheel now, but if you can also use the magnifier, the zoom tool or magnifier, which is called in other programs. Of course, we can now just get started here and start to draw like this. And in PhotoPaint, I press Control and the arrow key, the Shift, and then make it the nib smaller, as you can see. And this way, I can just start to color that like this. And of course, this would be similar to how we would do in a real life situation with paper and pens and so on, to stay within these lines. And it's really fun, and it's great, and there's nothing wrong to do with doing this when you're working digitally. But the thing is, in some situations and many situations, this is not necessarily how you do. You can do it differently. And when I say it's not what you do, it means it's not what you do if you want to keep the black outlines intact. If you don't care if the black outlines are covered, then go ahead and continue doing like I did. But there are other ways to do it. And many times, if we want to keep the outlines intact, you can do it differently. We could right click on this object here, the blue here, and in PhotoPaint, if you right click, you will see something called duplicate, and that will make the first object into a second object here called object 4 in this case. And you can start doing the same thing on this one, and when we press this little eye icon here, this first one will be inactive, so we can't do anything on it, and then we have to go back to the first one here. But what this actually is just so we can keep this first one in case we do any mistakes with the first one here. We can always throw it away and start anew, and then we have this original here active. Okay? So, but what I would suggest then, instead of doing like this, which really mimic the way we do it on paper and pen, would be to go over here. In PhotoPaint, it's called merge modes. If you use Adobe Photoshop, it's called layer styles, or not layer styles, it's called I forgot the word now. But in Corel Painter, it's called something else. But you will recognize it when you see words like multiply and so forth. And you already see that because I hover over the multiply here, you can see to the right here that the orange is now more darker orange, moving more towards the red. But if we use so-called another color here, or effect called add, subtract, difference, multiply, divide, if lighter. If lighter is a nice one here, and if darker. Let's say if we go with if darker, we can actually work on it, and you can actually paint underneath, so to speak, the outlines with and still keeping it intact. So you see, that's quite amazing, isn't it? And especially if you're new to digital painting, this is something I would suggest that you look into a little bit, because what now happens is that we can speed up this thing here, this work, by using this one here. Okay? But of course there is a problem with this one also, and that is that if we're now going to keep the outlines here intact and still add more paint to it, we can we can go to this side here and pick paint here, and then continue doing this. The problem with this, of course, is that these colors look different. If you see it here now, when we paint on something where it's not a color, it's just white. And it's because it reacts to the previous color, and it changes accordingly depending on what kind of effect you have over here. So that's why me, for example, what I do is to do like this. I have the first object from the beginning, and here you see that I accidentally put some paint on it over there. So what I do is to go over to this tool here, and it's called color transparency. You see, color transparency, and place myself on the white. Did you see what happened? I made it transparent. I can do it like this. We have it here, and then place myself on the white, drag to any side, and the white color will vanish. What we now can do is to create a new object. It's modified, yes. So we drag this underneath here now. We can now put a white color by right-clicking on the white color with a mouse or pen. Use the fill tool, which is called the bucket tool in some other programs, and then fill it with white if you want that. And then on top of that, we will now create a new object. And so you see, the object number 6 is now an empty object, while the object number 1 is the one with the drawing. So if we turn off the object with the white color, you will see the drawing on top of it here. So we can actually call it a drawing, so we know what we have. Okay? So, and then we activate the white background. So now we have these three here. We can actually add more objects on top of that and have those in between drawing and object. And I would suggest you have that set up like this to learn how to do it. Of course, you don't have to, for each new color, put a new object for every color, but you can do that if you like. So this is actually one of the very basics on how to start to color digitally in a computer program.